Hey all. So, as you can tell by this slide, we've got some important stuff to talk about. I'll say before we get into anything else, I know a lot of people were concerned that Relics was basically going to be just another gear system because that's what all of these free to play games do when they run out of ideas and it's just going to kill the game, right? If that's the decision that you want to come away with, I can't stop you, but I hope that you will watch the rest of this video because I really don't think that's what's happening here. If you haven't seen my announcement video yet, I work for Kabam as a champion designer. I have play tested all of the relics that are on their way out. I can't talk about all of those details, but hopefully I can give you some context throughout the rest of this video, and I will say up front, I really, really like relics. I am extremely excited for their addition to the contest, and I think that they are going to add depth and interest to this game in a way that I just can't see hurting it. I really do see this as an absolute win, to use that quote. So let's get into some of the specifics. So relics look like this, which in my opinion is pretty sweet. Now I will say it says the first type of relic we'll introduce looks like this. I do not currently know of any plans to create other types of relics, but I'm just going to call out the fact that I fully see that language. I do understand some of the implications of it, and it's possible we'll see more. But for now, let's just focus on these battlecasts, because that's what's in the pipeline, that's what I can talk to you about, and that's what I'm excited about. So each of these battlecasts can be bound to a specific character, and will allow you to summon a striker when using that character. But that is not all they do. They also have other abilities that enhance how that character's kit already functions. So like it says, these relics can be obtained in different rarities, which obviously are going to have different power levels, but all of them give you access to this striker and at least one ability. So, again, these strikers are the core of the battlecasts. If you bind a champion to the relic, then they get a new gauge, a striker gauge. If you've played with strikers before in some of the events where Kabam was testing them, then this will be familiar to you, but in my opinion, it has been streamlined, it looks better, it makes more sense now. In my opinion, it is harder to accidentally press as well. And basically, as you land hits, as you take hits, this striker gauge will fill, and then you can use it to summon the striker. And as with some of the earlier tests, that striker will have some ability triggered by actually landing the striker. I believe all of them need to actually land. You can't just throw this into block and get the ability, but all of these strikers have something that should help out the character. Also note that it says we'll perform a combo. This is kind of a change from some of the earlier strikers that were using more special attacks. Special animations have a lot of variables attached to them, but in general they tend to be longer. So the trend for strikers more recently has been to shorten them up and do basically like a medium-medium or a medium-light-medium, so that they interrupt your character's rotations less. And I can tell you from playing with that, it's a very welcome change. And another thing I want to say about this is that not only can you chain a combo into this striker combo, but as with previous tests of these strikers, at the end of the striker combo, there will be a stun. This allows you to follow up with yet another combo, allowing you to do very long combos with any character that has a battlecast attached to it. Additionally, this has been tuned up so that when your character teleports back in, they are reliably closer to the opponent. You can more easily land a heavy if that's what you want to do. Instead of needing to charge in to land a more traditional combo, you can use this to potentially throw a special attack. And crucially, in the current form of these, the stun at the end of a striker combo ignores stun immunity. allowing you to make use of this combo extension even against opponents with stun immunity. It can really change how certain characters play. If you really need to line up an important heavy, this can give you your window. This is a powerful ability even outside of what the striker itself does. So, relics have innate abilities. Like it says, can be unlocked and enhanced through duplicating the relic. This is basically a signature ability for the relic. As with champions, you are going to want to pull these more than once, and doing so will make them stronger. And then after the striker and the innate ability, which will always be on your relic, stronger relics are going to have slots where you can pick abilities and attributes that hopefully are going to work well on the character that you have chosen. Now let's talk about that a little more. Because you can bind these Battlecasts to any champion of a specific class, but some champions are going to benefit more than others. However, as we talked about earlier, the striker on its own is pretty powerful, so you can put that on any character of that class without having to worry about the rest of the abilities lining up perfectly. Now, you can unbind these relics and move them around, and it says for a fee, but I really want to focus on this table here, because the fees don't actually happen until you move these around a lot. Like it says, every time you unbind, you move up one on this table, right? Which means that you have to get all the way to your 7th unbind in a short period before this actually costs units. And every 5 days, you move back down the table. So basically, as long as you don't move your relics around more than every 5 days, you'll never have to pay for them. That much customization is built into the system, and I personally like that. It's a choice. If you try to treat it as a trivial choice, it will eventually cost you something. But short of that, you do have room to experiment. So moving on to an example. This is the Venom Battlecast. It's one of the cosmic options that will be available in the first set. The actual striker, like it says, it summons Venom and inflicts a bleed vulnerability debuff, increasing the potency of future bleed effects. So this is a new take on vulnerability. This is not just going to be a blanket, the defender takes 200% more damage while bleeding, right? Because we've seen that on nodes. This is its own kind of debuff. This is just making future bleeds better. I realize that can be kind of confusing, but I want to call that out ahead of time because this one does function differently. For the innate ability, you get these extra indefinite bleed vulnerability debuffs just by having unique buffs. So this is a good example of something that's going to key better off of certain characters than others. For one thing, not every Cosmic has access to bleeds. This is not going to be very helpful on Super Scroll, the innate, right? Also, not every character has access to a bunch of different unique buffs. Venom, Venompool, and Carnage, you'll notice the theming, have more unique buffs and bleeds than someone like Gamora, who has access to a few buffs and bleeds. It would still be good on Gamora, but it won't be as dramatic as it will be on Venom or Venompool. So then you have your first ability, Ravenous Strike. For each unique buff on the champion, bleed debuffs last longer and are more likely to land. So that's already very helpful. You notice that this benefit caps out at a certain number of buffs. It's important to keep in mind that earlier I talked about different relics will have different numbers of slots, so expect for a lot of these abilities and attributes that you will have to choose between the options. So maybe I want Ravenous Strike for these more accurate bleeds, or maybe I want Merciless Strike, where for each unique buff, I get extra critical damage rating and a flat amount of critical rating. So for somebody like Venom or Carnage who has random bleeds, and who can inflict a lot of bleeds on top of each other, something like Ravenous Strike might be more advantageous. But for someone like Venompool, or we also mentioned Gamora, this Merciless Strike might be more helpful because they don't stack bleeds as much as have very good ones that they then want to follow up on for damage. And then for our attributes, you can see This one helps the potency of certain buffs. This one helps your bleed potency. And then this last one is one that you're only going to pick if you're picking Venom Pool, Carnage, or Venom, because it only helps them. It reduces how long the mutation buffs last on Venom and Carnage, and it decreases the timer on Venom Pool's cooking meter. So that's obviously very good for those three characters, but you would probably focus on the other two attributes with anyone else. So that's basically how a relic is going to work. You get it, you attach it to a specific character, you get access to the striker. If you pull the relic again, you get access to the innate. The higher the rarity of the relic, the more of these abilities and attributes you will be able to choose between to further customize the character and have their kit tie together more completely. I also want to call out, for those of you who are worried about the UI, when this says bleed vulnerability debuff, relics have their own icons. So we are used to round icons for abilities in game, and we are used to a little border on abilities that come from nodes, right? Relics have a different outline. Off the top of my head, I believe I remember it as a hexagon. And so while for some of these characters the HUD can get kind of cluttered, it's important to know ahead of time that relics do have their own icons, which makes it a lot easier to process than it otherwise might be. Because that's something that I used to be worried about. After playing with them, I think that it strikes a pretty happy balance. So this is what the actual relic screen looks like. As you can see, we have one of these rune slots, this middle one selected, and this is allowing us to pick between the three attributes. You can see that this is a 5-star relic, and so there is one ability rune and 2 attribute runes. If you go back to the above slide, then you'll remember that there were 2 total abilities and 3 total attributes, so you get to pick 1 of 2 and 2 of 3, but this is a 5-star, so that's a lot of customization. A lower rarity relic might not have that, but notice that there are these 2 slots down at the bottom that are currently crossed out, leaving room for some future version where you could potentially have all of these. You'll also see that where it says plus 5% Fury, Precision, and Cruelty buff potency, that is a green number. As with champion info pages, that is going to improve with the level of the slot. Notice down here it says slot level 50, and there is an upgrade part. Relics do have their own upgrade materials. I will point out, because I know somebody's going to be worried about gold, and with good reason, they are designed to not use as much gold to upgrade as champions, and the economy designers did tell us there is going to be more gold on the horizon, so don't worry about that too much here. The point is that, as with champions, relics are going to get stronger both as you pull multiple copies and as you invest resources to level them up. And then over here on the right, you have a quick rundown of what the relic is looking like, and it will list the champion abilities if you have selected one and then bound it to it. The bind menu is this in the bottom right, where you will see both your Battlecast and the character that you have attached it to. These are just going to live in another screen under the roster. Where you're used to going to look at your champions, there will now be 2 screens. There will be this screen where you have all of your champions, and then another one where you have all of your relics. So that is something to look forward to. So another thing to note about relics, you may have already seen this first one mentioned on forums or in line chats or something, but relics are going to affect prestige. I will say ahead of time, they contribute significantly less to your overall prestige than your champions do. You don't have to worry about all of your progress being wiped out just because somebody has more relics than you. But they are going to be a factor. Very important note, this is regardless of who they're bound to. If you pull the Venom Battlecast, then you can apply it to Carnage without worrying about Carnage's prestige. You don't need to feel compelled to apply it to your Hercules or your Surfer, who won't get any benefit from it. This also means that in general, relics can kind of shore up some of the areas of your roster that are struggling a little bit more. Maybe you have characters that you love playing. They feel good, but they're not quite as powerful as those at the very top, who may be newer and have better prestige. If you put a relic on them, they may end up doing more for you. So that is one thing I really like about this system. Like, I am specifically looking forward to putting this Venom Battlecast on my Venom pool, who I love, but isn't always worth bringing outside of his niche matchups. This will expand his use cases, and I love that. Even though Venom Pool will never, ever contribute to my prestige, the relic on him potentially will. So like it says, these relic battlecasts will only be usable on attackers. There may be other relics in the future that are specifically good for defenders, but right now you only have to worry about them on attack. You don't have to worry about getting comboed in Alliance War and oops, now there's a striker and you are just even more dead than you were before. Thankfully. But this is going to just be an attacker mechanic. Like it says, relics will only be usable in some game modes as well. As you can tell by what we were talking about earlier, these make certain characters' rotations more potent, they increase their ceilings, they maybe make those rotations easier by allowing certain effects to tie into others more easily. All of that has balance implications. And so they are not being rolled out into the very highest levels of war immediately. That would be very scary. The idea is to ultimately have them be usable in more game modes, but for starters, they will be allowed in Arena, Battlegrounds, Incursions, your monthly event quests, side quests, Realm of Legends, because, how would we test these without our favorite punching bag, and Labyrinth of Legends. So, important to note that does mean these will provide a significant advantage in Battlegrounds, but Battlegrounds is also the mode where you will be getting most of your relics. That personally doesn't bother me. I am extremely excited to try and get my hands on my first relics and take them into Incursions, because some of the champions that are best in Incursions may not be the most obvious ones for other content. Maybe there's a relic that makes them that much more competitive. I'm very excited about this, as I've said before and as you can tell. And then, this is another important one. Relics are subject to balance changes in the future, and will be going forward. After 3 months, relics are open to a change, and if that doesn't do it, they can be changed again. I know a lot of people are really not going to be happy about that. I understand it, but it really is inevitable, because relics are basically messing with parts of the game that we considered finished. There are a whole bunch of characters who were tuned around certain rotations, certain abilities, certain ceilings, and then left that way. They have not been rebalanced, because we didn't think that we needed to worry about them except when we added in synergies for them. Now we have to worry about synergies and relics, and crucially, the interplay between synergies and relics. So this is just a lot of wide-reaching implications, and so that is why they are open to balancing in perpetuity. The good news is, if something happens to a relic that affects how useful it is on your favorite champion, you can move it to another champion. This is one big benefit of the fact that investing in these relics will end up being useful one way or another. The goal is not to make it so that relics are never too helpful. The goal is to make sure that relics don't close some loop that was intentionally left open on a character that suddenly makes them broken. That is what we are trying to avoid, because when one character is broken, all of the others become less interesting as a result. So, this next slide, it says you, and I want to just immediately say that is referring to the CCP. And I am sorry about that. for those of you who want to try it, but we will be allowed to give you content on this preview. So, as you can see, today is September 28th. That is when we are allowed to talk to the community about this, and that means that any questions within the context of this document, I will be able to answer on streams going forward. We can talk about it there. And then starting on the 3rd of October, Relics will come to the CCP server. You will notice that for the first 2 days of that, we are not allowed to make content on it. That is because this is a brand new part of the game. We have play tested these quite a bit. They've gone through QA passes, but this is a big game. Something may have slipped through. The idea is for those first 2 days, that's to try and fix things so that then we can give you, the community, a better picture. And then we will have from the 5th to the 14th to show you all of this Relics content on the CCP server. Stick around for that. Be sure to ask any questions you have at the time. And now let's get to the part that I think is probably going to annoy even more people. 7 stars are coming. Yep, that's right. Relics and 7 stars are not mutually exclusive. I understand that's what a lot of people were hoping for, that Relics delayed 7 stars, but they are coming together. Unfortunately, we are reaching basically the end of the lifetime of 6 stars, and so something else is coming. Now, I will say there has been a lot of focus internally on making sure that this is a much less painful process than the transition from 5 to 6 stars. Because I was there, I remember, that was a pretty hard reset. Basically, you had all these 5 stars leveled up, you were using them all over the place, you had your favorites, and it felt like, boom, time to start over. They weren't going to be competitive really soon. Now, for those of us who were playing at the time, 5 stars held on a lot longer than I think many of us feared they would, but it was still a hard reset. The goal is to do that differently this time. So that is the idea of Ascension. We'll get to that in a second, but let's just talk about 7 stars first. The obvious part is that 7 stars will have better stats. They'll have higher health, they'll have higher attack, they'll have higher challenge rating. They will be better. They will also have their own gameplay mechanic, but I couldn't leak this to you even if I wanted to. Like this says, that is still being worked on. We'll talk about it when there's something to talk about. So 7 stars will first appear as opponents in November, and then in spring you will start to be able to collect them. Like it says, there really is a huge focus on trying to respect existing rosters. We want there to be growth, but we don't want it to be growth that is only possible because the slate has been wiped clean. And so with that in mind, we'll talk about Ascension in a second. So in November, as soon as 7 stars come out as defenders, duplicating 6 stars will give you 7-star shards. Yay! Alright, it's time. There's something for getting these. Now, you won't be able to buy any crystals with those shards because they won't be ownable as characters yet, but you will start getting 7 shards then. This should coincide pretty closely with the next feature crystal, but note what it says. You will need to update to 37.0 to get 7-star shards, so when that new feature crystal comes out, make sure you are updated before you open any of them. If you're like me and you're sitting on a hoard of 6-star shards and you're hoping to open a bunch as soon as the crystal goes live, make sure that you are updated or you won't get any 7-star shards for it. This is not something that will be backdated. That's why it's being told to everyone right now. Plan for it. Additionally, if you want to start holding on to basics so that you can open those and get 7-star shards, then yeah, go ahead, hold on to them now, but don't open them until you update if that is your goal. Okay, so on the topic of not doing another hard reset of rosters, we have to talk about Ascension. This is still something that is being worked on. The details are not set in stone yet, so there are questions that I cannot answer. There are questions that my bosses cannot fully answer. We'll have more detail when we can. But the purpose here is to allow lower rarity champions to exceed their current maximum potential. So 4 stars, 5 stars, 6 stars, ascending them will improve their attack and health and allow them to take on higher level content. This will allow your 6 stars especially to be comparable to 7 stars for a while yet, so that you don't have to just suddenly give up on them. How long exactly that will mean the best 6 stars stay competitive with the best 7 stars is, like I said, something I can't answer because we haven't worked out the details yet. But the idea is, if you have, I'm just going to use my personal example. I have a 6-star rank 4 Sig 200 Mr. Fantastic. This means that if I do not quickly get and dupe a 7-star Mr. Fantastic, I can potentially ascend my 6-star and use him in content that was designed with 7 stars in mind, and he will be able to keep up. Additionally, as we start seeing more and more 7-star defenders in war or in battlegrounds, ascended 6 stars are again going to be able to keep up. This is the key of this whole next step. The reason that we feel comfortable adding 7 stars to the contest is because we are confident that Ascension will allow you to hold on to your 6 stars, and for many summoners, even 5 stars or 4 stars, longer without having to move on to the next rarity. I'm sure a lot of you are going to ask, why do we need all 3, right? And the simple answer is that these are extending the heights of the contest along different axes. 7 stars have better base stats. Relics allow us to bridge RPG elements. Like you saw earlier, the example of the Venom Battlecast is that relic allows champions that bleed to do better bleeds. It allows, once they have a bleed up, they can inflict more bleeds. The bleeds last longer. If uptime is something you're concerned about, it rewards you for having a bunch of unique buffs. That is an RPG side of design. It's making the kits broader and more powerful, but it's not affecting the base stats. Similarly, if we just threw out 7 stars, that would increase the base stats, but it wouldn't allow us to do these interesting things on the RPG side. And so doing both allows us to grow in 2 different directions and make the game, in our opinion, more interesting in the future in a more complete way. And because we think we need both Relics and 7 stars, then we also need Ascension, because if we didn't have Ascension, then 6 stars and 5 stars would fall by the wayside more quickly, and the idea is for that not to happen this time. So, as I said, there are still a lot of things being worked out on 7 stars and Ascension, so if you ask me a whole bunch of questions about them, I won't be able to answer them most likely. But, we can have those discussions in streams or in the comments here. In general, the questions that I can answer a little bit better are about Relics, and I look forward to being able to stream some content for all of y'all as soon as we are able to do that on October 5th. Let me know what you're thinking of this. Hopefully I've made you a little bit more optimistic about both Relics and 7 stars, but I understand it's probably not going to be that easy for everyone. I'll catch y'all in the comments and on my streams, and until then, thanks so much for watching, and take care.